When my friend Mark and I first got into urban exploring, we were reckless. We would hunt down abandoned buildings and old houses, looking for adrenaline. Mark was always trying to find proof of the paranormal, while I just went along for the architecture and the thrill. But out of all the rotting places we broke into, only one night left me completely at a loss for words. It was an extremely dark, cloudy night when Mark found a house, hidden deep in the woods, miles from the nearest main road. The structure was in terrible shape, barely standing. The front door was completely boarded up, and I had to physically kick it down to get us inside. The moment we stepped through, our flashlights revealed that half the living room floor was completely gone. A massive, gaping hole led straight down into the pitch-black basement ruins. I told Mark we needed to get out before the place collapsed on us, but he just gave me his usual line. "Just wait a minute." He started sneaking around the edges of the hole to search the back rooms, but I refused to budge from the front door frame. A few minutes later, curiosity got the better of me, and I followed him into a side room, stacked to the ceiling with old rotting junk. Mark was digging through trash trying to find old artifacts, but then he pointed a flashlight toward the darkness above and told me to check the upstairs. Reluctantly, I stepped onto the creaking wooden staircase, terrified each step would be my last. At the top of the stairs, the first room to the right was an old bedroom. A decaying bed was still neatly made, with a folded bathrobe resting at the foot of it, as if someone had just vanished into thin air decades ago. In the corner of the room, my light caught a low crawl space. I crept inside and found it packed with ancient, dust-covered boxes of baby food and unopened diapers, heavily chewed through by rodents. The stench was foul. As I turned to leave the crawl space, a sharp, rhythmic creaking sound echoed through the walls. I followed a narrow gap in the crawl space that seemed to cut straight across the length of the house to the second bedroom. The creaking was coming from down there. I backed out of the crawl space and walked down the pitch-black hallway. The sound grew louder with every step. My heart was racing, fully expecting to get jumped by wild animals. I quietly stepped through the doorway of the second bedroom and froze. A woman was sitting in an old wooden rocking chair, staring directly out the window. The back of the chair was facing me. I could only see the top of her head and a long, tattered skirt draping down her legs. She was slowly, rhythmically rocking back and forth. I took one step forward, and the floorboard groaned beneath my boot. The rocking stopped instantly. I started to apologize, thinking she was a squatter, but before I could finish, she started rocking again, completely unfazed. I took another step, asking if she was okay. She stopped again, stood up slowly, and let out a chilling, low hum. Then, out of nowhere, she violently whipped around to face me. I couldn't catch the details of her face because it happened so fast, but her skin looked deeply wrinkled and unnatural. Panic set in. I turned and sprinted down the stairs, screaming at Mark that we had to leave right now. Mark just laughed, completely convinced I was pulling a prank on him. I pleaded with him, but he insisted on seeing it for himself. I followed him back upstairs to the end of the hall, terrified of what was waiting. When Mark reached the doorway, he gasped, "Oh my God." I braced myself, but then Mark broke into a loud laugh. I looked inside. The rocking chair was sitting completely empty. Mark mocked me, asking if I was terrified of old furniture, and walked right into the room to look around. There was absolutely nobody there. Frustrated and shaken, I agreed to leave. We both walked back out into the hallway toward the stairs. Then, we both froze. From the empty room behind us, the rhythmic creaking started again. The chair was rocking. Mark turned pale. As we stood paralyzed at the top of the stairs, a low, melodic humming sound drifted out of the room. Mark took a few slow steps back to the doorway, and this time, he saw her with his own eyes. The old woman, sitting in the chair, humming to herself in the dark. Mark didn't say a word. He turned around, and we both tore down the stairs and ran out the front door, sprinting all the way to the car. We tore out of the woods in total silence, too terrified to even look back at the window. Years later, we went back to find the property. The house was completely gone, torn down to the ground with absolutely no remnants or debris left behind. To this day, I don't know if we stumbled upon a squatter living in impossible conditions or if the house was holding on to something much worse.